Okay, I still see people joining, but I think we're ready to go. So once again, welcome everybody to the webinar on how to recruit Gen Z and Alpha generation students, the most ad-resistant generations. My name is Patrik Pavlacic, and I'm the Chief Intelligence Officer at BONARD. And it is my great pleasure to welcome today our dear industry friend and a renowned industry professional, Bosco Anthony, who's the Chief Brand Officer at Global RevGen. And he's going to share some of the most interesting case studies, but also developments when it comes to using AI in international student recruitment. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping notes to help you to get the most out of today's session. So the webinar is going to be run for about 60 minutes. We will be doing 40-minute presentation, and afterwards there's going to be a 20-minute Q&A. I also would like to encourage you to ask any questions. There's a Q&A box, so please feel free to target any questions. Obviously, we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the session. The session's also being recorded, and both the recording and presentation will be made available after the webinar. Last but not least, feel free to stay up to date with our work by visiting bonardeducation.com or following us on LinkedIn. For those of you who are not familiar with BONARD, we are an independent research company. We specialize in international education, where we work with universities, language schools, associations, government bodies, investors, and other stakeholders. And we drive their market expansion strategies by deploying data-driven recruitment strategies. About today's agenda, we will start with a brief market update. We will be delving deep into the latest and statistically closed 2024 data to discuss the international education recruitment landscape, the recent changes, implication for providers, but also market outlook. We will then also do a case study, how to use the latest visa data to help identify high potential source countries. And then we'll proceed to display how to engage prospective students in your target markets using AI. So it's very important to have this sort of context and to have your source countries prioritized before you deploy any marketing activities, especially in such a volatile environment that we're seeing at the moment. And then, as mentioned, me and Bosco will be very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Starting with the industry context, I think it's quite obvious that by now we've seen quite significant restrictions on international student recruitment placed by the Big Four destinations. I'm specifically referring to the UK, the US, Australia, and Canada. Whether it's been the formal cap or sort of informal cap, challenges with the visa processing or increasing proof of funds, etc. We could probably spend another hour listing all the recent developments, which have really led to the recruitment outlook for education providers in these destinations to be challenged. And what we have seen since sort of the last 12 months was obvious short-term impact that manifested itself in terms of destination shifts. We've seen some imminent beneficiaries, destinations in Europe, such as Germany and France. Germany has actually rose by 5% in 2024-2025 winter semester. But also Asia, where we're seeing destinations, sort of new emerging destinations taking up market share, namely Malaysia, Singapore, etc. But also regional hubs such as Dubai, which are heavily investing into promoting themselves as feasible study destinations for international students, offering work rights, again, and favorable conditions to enter the destination. Coupled with that, we're also seeing long-term impact or sort of beginnings of it, which sort of manifests itself in terms of accelerated development of in-country delivery. What I mean by that is basically that the local education systems are improving, both in terms of quality and quantity, which is going to also affect student mobility flows. We're definitely seeing rise in inter-regional mobility, specifically again in Asia, where destinations like Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Japan and China are sort of welcoming more and more international students. We've seen proliferation of T&E models in all their forms and shapes, and we believe that this trend is going to continue also in light of the restrictions in some destinations like Australia. We've seen a lot of activity in the T&E field in the recent months. And it's also related to the growth of international schools, which are again contributing to the development of the local supply. So more and more education is also taking place in students' home countries, compared to the last decades. One of the most important developments that we're also observing is that students are actually changing the ways they enter higher education systems abroad, which affects how institutions recruit these students. Pathway programs, again, partnerships between higher education providers and local secondary, high schools and international schools. These are all having a profound impact on how providers choose their priority source markets, and secondly, how they engage with prospective students. So this is the most recent context. Now, I want to share a little bit more about how BONARD's approach helps identify high potential markets. So in our 17 years of experience, we've worked with a number of data sets. Just to clarify some of these, we tend to prefer taking a holistic approach to student recruitment, taking into account all the data that's available to us. Namely, it's the student enrollment data, which I assume everybody's familiar with. This is the bread and butter, for longitudinal decision making when it comes to market selection. However, in the last 5 years, we also work increasingly with visa application and grant data. We see great potential for institutions and stakeholders to start using this data for the purposes of international student recruitment. And we've been working with governments to make the data more available. We process it in a way that it only covers main applicants and offshore students. So onshore recruitment is basically removed, which again allows you to identify markets that make sense for the offshore recruitment. Then we also work with visa grant rate data. This is very important because in some cases, as soon as you see visa grant rates dropping, it sort of indicates that recruitment will be more challenging in a particular market. And we also couple this in mobility flows data with economic and political developments, demographic trends, and also very importantly, local market insights. So we run a number of provider and agent surveys to really understand what is happening on the ground. Today, I'd really like to focus on the visa application and grant data to showcase how it can complement institutions' understanding when selecting the priority markets. What you're seeing at the moment is, I think, the well-known enrollment data. You're looking at the top 5 English-speaking destinations that we sort of monitor on a regular basis. We've seen sort of a rebound after COVID in the US, although the growth has slowed down. And as you may probably know, this data doesn't necessarily tell you the full story of what's been happening in the US, as the recent visa challenges brought along recruitment challenges. We've also seen strong recovery pace in the UK and relatively robust growth between 2019 and 2022, and then a dip in enrollment, which was mostly caused by the restriction on the inability to bring dependents for students, mostly affecting Indian and Nigerian students. We're also seeing a rebound in Australia after the border opening, as well as relatively managed growth in Canada. We're only looking at undergraduate and graduate students at the moment. And we're also seeing New Zealand sort of very moderately, growing back to the pre-pandemic numbers. However, as I said, the problem with enrollment data is that it becomes available once a year, and by the time it's available, it's also quite outdated. So it's very good for longitudinal decision making, but it doesn't tell you the full picture, especially when we look at any imminent impacts of things like visa policy changes. Now, in order to be able to monitor that, as I said, we're turning to visa data. And over here, you're able to see a comparison of the respective quarters of 2024, how student visa grants evolved. One thing to note is that visa grants are super useful when you're trying to anticipate future student enrollment and you're assessing future student pipelines. So what we've seen basically due to the numerous restrictions and policy intervention in these destinations was that Australia essentially dropped by 24%. So there are 24% fewer student visa grants in 2024 compared to 2023. We've seen a shift in Canada, as soon as the impact of the new enrollment cap policy started to take effect, we've seen quite robust drops, again, mostly in the number of Indian students. And overall, we saw a 24% drop in study permit issuance compared to 2023. On the other hand, we've seen New Zealand, slowly capitalizing on some of the opportunities stemming from this challenging recruitment outlook in the Big Four, which has resulted in a 9% increase in new student visas being issued to international students. In the UK, again, going back to the policy change regarding dependents, we've seen some stabilization in Q3 and Q4. However, Q3 is the most important quarter when it comes to student visas, so that 13% was actually a big drop in terms of absolute numbers. And in the US, firstly, beginning of the year, we've seen some improved performance, some sort of continuation of the positive trend. But throughout the year, there's been a bit of a turbulent situation also when it comes to the new administration coming into place. And overall, the US experienced a 12% decline in the number of F1 student visa issuance. So if you tie this picture to what we've seen in terms of enrollment, there's obviously going to be impact on new student enrollment in 2025. Now, despite that picture, one of our key remits is to be able to identify markets that do offer or demonstrate growth potential. So over the last 12 months, we've actually seen some markets outperform the market standard and sort of driving growth to certain destinations. However, what's also interesting is that probably the era where markets were growing across the 4 destinations are over. And what we're seeing is that student flows are really, really changing, and it's quite destination specific. So for the US, we've seen Vietnam perform really, really well, throughout the quarters. Also, Nepal continues to grow for the US, and Pakistan emerged as one of the priority markets for US providers. We've also seen really strong performance by Bangladesh, and another source market that posted solid growth for the US providers was Myanmar. When we look at the UK, the student profiles also changing. Pakistan was the leading source country when it comes to new student visa grants, followed by Nepal. So that importance of the Indian subcontinent for both the US and UK providers has increased in the last year. We've also seen, I would say, growing interest among US students to study in the UK. That actually placed the US as the 3rd fastest growing market for the UK. Myanmar, again, appearing quite solid for UK providers. And from African markets, Kenya posted solid development for the UK. If you look at Australia, also due to the challenges in terms of recruitment, we don't see India anywhere near the top growing markets. China was the leading market for higher education providers, followed by Bangladesh. We've also seen solid performance by Indonesia and South Korea and Taiwan. So the proximity plays a really, really important role for providers in Australia. And if we look at Canada, obviously, because of the major drops across all the main markets, there's been only few markets that grow actual growth, but also it has to be noted that these increases were relatively minor. and sort of mostly came from markets in Africa, and interestingly, Central Asia. So the key takeaway is that source market flows are really becoming destination specific. On the other hand, it is very, very useful to be able to see what's happening, in your competitor destinations and which markets are actually still offering potential. Moving on to the latest quarter, which is the Q4 2024, just that to demonstrate that using visa data allows you to adjust basically on a quarterly basis. We've seen the return of China. China was the fastest growing market for Australia, Canada, and New Zealand in Q4. It's been also observed that Pakistan and Bangladesh continued to grow in terms of importance for UK and US institutions. Interestingly, Nepal still going strong for the UK. However, other destinations losing market share. Bangladesh, one of the interesting markets that sort of still shows growth across the majority of markets, so offers good opportunities regardless of destination. And as probably seen in the previous slide, it's really strong performance reconfirmed by Indonesia and Myanmar. As I mentioned before, one of the most imminent impacts of the visa policy changes was that in a lot of markets, we've seen shifts in terms of destination preferences. This is a case study on Nepal, where you're able to see annual aggregated data on the number of visa grants. As you can see, Australia used to be the top destination for Nepalese students up until 2022. After the visa policy change and the challenges with visa processing, we've seen the market in sort of a free fall. Very similar scenario in Canada, where up until 2023, Nepal constituted one of the fastest growing markets for providers. On the other hand, we're seeing, very, very consistent growth for providers in the UK and the US. So again, a practical demonstration of how the visa data allows you to compare destinations and assess potential of a market in a wider context. We're also part of our remit. We also monitor markets to watch. For 2025, we've identified 15 markets that are poised to continue either delivering volume or growth potential for providers. Pakistan is one of the markets that I'd say offer consistent growth, but you also are able to see what impact do the policy changes have on, let's say, the total addressable market. If you look at Australia, Pakistan was performing very, very solid up until 2023. In 2024, unfortunately, due to the visa grant rate, we've seen sort of the market collapse in a way. Similar trajectory for Canada, consistent growth year in, year out. However, due to the policy change, we've seen a massive drop in the number of new study permits being issued to students in Pakistan. On the other hand, New Zealand, we've seen consistent growth, albeit small, but it's on the trajectory where I think the market will continue to benefit from the situation in Australia and Canada. And you see very, very strong performance for the UK, where actually Pakistan was the main driver in terms of new student visa being issued. And also in the US, with the very challenging environment and the vast majority of markets declining at the moment, we still see a positive development from Pakistan. And as I noted before, one of the key performance indicators that we track on also historically is the grant rate. As from a very practical point of view, it allows you to determine whether a market is suitable for either recruitment travel or deployment of digital marketing campaigns. And we do this sort of across markets. Unfortunately, this indicator is not available in the US at the moment, but cumulatively, this gives you an idea of how a market performs, even if you are a US-based operator. We've seen quite some shifts, sort of a bit of a roller coaster in Australia. Again, going back to why some of these students did not receive their visa. and also some recruitment advice from the team, where we recommend to focus on, preparing students with strong profiles, and also start rebuilding trust with clear communication, although it really might take some time before kind of the student flows to Australia opens up. When it comes to Canada, we see a relatively low acceptance rate. Recommendation is to support students with their study intent documentations and funds preparation, which is very, very important in that processing. For New Zealand, we do expect that there might be more strict screening of applicants from Pakistan. As you can see, the grant rate is still very, very high. But this is something that we'd recommend to take a note of. And then if you look at the UK, because these are obviously sponsored students, the approval rate is also very, very high. Our recommendation is just to continue emphasizing the UK's high approval rate and post-study options as sort of a key message for prospective students. So I hope this part was useful. All of this information is available as part of our newly launched interactive data platform, which sort of serves as a tool to monitor ongoingly over 200 source markets, and you can create and empower your international student recruitment strategy by tapping into all this information, plus you sort of getting access to BONARD webinars, market updates, and also vetted quality agents. So it's sort of a one-stop shop for international student recruitment, with the objective of making institutions more independent and better prepared for the recruitment for their recruitment plans. At this point, I think it also serves as a great bridge to showcase what GRG has been doing in the market, and also possibly how they using market data to inform the campaigns that they do for their clients. So Bosco, please feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm just going to share my screen and we can kick this off. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And I'm just going to blow up my screen. Hopefully, you can see the main screen, Patrick.
All good.
So, Global Rev Gen GRG, we specialize in media buying and marketing automation consultancies. We work with about 70% of the universities in Australia. This is just a snapshot of some of our education clients. We also have education clients in other parts of the world. I'm the Chief Brand Officer for Global RevGen, and my background spans from Canada, North America, Europe, as well as Australia and New Zealand. And so, in the sector of AI, I mean, that's the big question right now is, has AI really penetrated the education sector? And, according to Nous Group, you can see AI has gone from admissions to onboarding to teaching to student support, belonging, and engagement. And these are some of the areas where we're expecting to see a drastic surge in innovation when it comes to the education landscape being impacted. But at Global RevGen, we focus on international media buying. To date, we have spent probably over $150 million in advertising across 75 to 80 different countries. And we typically have a very strong framework when it comes to media buying, especially in a landscape where policy is now changing and impacting a lot of the destinations that we are working with. We're also seeing a rise of micro destinations, and we're also seeing an impact in the T&E space. And because we work with all three areas, we put together a framework that any institution can use and apply when it comes to their international marketing. So at the top, you will see things like the global and domestic trends that impact policy, that impact student accommodations and mobility trends. And then we look into competition, and I'll talk about our AI innovation in a bit, but we look at what is the competition doing in market, and then we look at what's happening on an institution level. What do we see from a market and audience insight scenario, what the sentiment is in market, and then that really then comes down to the campaign and how we approach our marketing campaigns. There's that old saying, what happens at the top really impacts what happens at the bottom. And as a marketing agency, we're no longer just brought in on the brief stage. We work with our clients to understand what the 3 to 5 year roadmap is and then deconstruct backwards. So, I'm going to talk about some of the trends and the marketing era that we're in today, especially with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, because it's a different, sophisticated audience that is now changing how consumers look at the education landscape. If any one of you have ever used Netflix, you will see that at the end of your show, it says, if you watch this show, here are a couple of recommendations. So, Netflix was one of the first consumers or the first retailer brands that basically wanted to create the age of personalization for the consumers. And because we are no longer living in an age where a one size fits all audience works anymore, we're now at an era of real-time personalization. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we get AI, generative AI, to become predictive AI? And how does AI get leveraged to create custom experiences? Because that's the age and era that we're moving to when it comes to the landscape of education. So as we've seen, as we look at what one size fits all marketing was to where we are now, the age of predictive personalization will have a lift in the conversion when it comes to consumer behavior. So here's a great example. Here's two people that are males. They were both born in 1948. They were both raised in the UK. They've both been married twice. They both live in a castle, and they're both wealthy and famous. The problem is if they both had dogs, and they wanted to buy dog food, how you would personalize your advertising to Prince Charles would look very different to how you'd personalize your advertising to Ozzy Osbourne. So even though you have the same demographic, the messaging might be very different. So, as a company, we have really fully embraced AI, and we don't just talk about AI as far as us embracing it. We actually built products and brought products to market where we use AI to create those personalization in our marketing approach. So, the first product that we built was a product called Quant Plus. And we saw an opportunity in the market where there was a lot of tools that told us how to optimize our advertising campaigns. But at that point, it was too late because we had already spent all this money on advertising. So we found an opportunity to sit on the pre-optimization stage before you spent your advertising dollar and before you spent money on creatives. Now, if you're an institution, we all know that it takes a lot of work to get approvals from procurement and your stakeholders to go spend money on media buying. Imagine if you spent $1 million and you then realize you wasted half of that advertising spend. There's an old saying in marketing that says, half my marketing is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half. So we wanted to solve that problem, and this is how Quant works. So what you're seeing right now is a live representation of how AI is studying skin tonality, it's studying the hero image, it's studying the background, it's studying everything you can see in creative ads and market in the higher education sector. It's looking at images, it's looking at banners, it's looking at videos. And we took this to market with our Australian clients first. Today, we're across 21 different other verticals. We just signed a exclusive deal with bookings.com, and we've got quite a bit of other industries that we have now onboarded this particular tool for. Now, the advantage of this is we're not just extracting creative intelligence, but we are also tagging and understanding what are the key elements in performance advertising when it comes to design layouts, color palettes, ad copy, hero images, people, settings, infrastructure. Today in Australia, 70% of the universities use this technology, and we now have universities in the US and Canada and the UK also using this technology to inform their insights when it comes to international marketing. And, everything from what to put an ad in China could look very different to what to put an ad in Bhutan or what to put an ad in Kenya. So this intelligence, we rolled it out 3 years ago. It's a world's first technology, and this is, what an intelligence report will generally look like. That was 3 years ago. Just a few weeks ago, we have had some innovation success, but I wanted to show you a campaign case study. So this is the University of Wollongong, and they came to us with a brand awareness campaign to attract young students in China. And in China, the conversion for this campaign was the average industry benchmark is about 1% on a localized platform called WeChat. And Wollongong had a 2.1 click-through rate. And we basically used our Quant Plus innovation to feed the creatives in this particular ad. And as you can see here, Tencent and WeChat had shown the top performing ads in market for the industry, and our ad was the industry benchmark for the best ad that was performing in China on that particular platform. So imagine what you could do with the power of intelligence powered by AI. So this is actual intelligence leveraging artificial intelligence. So today, these intelligence reports, we have over 35 countries, everything from the Philippines to Vietnam. We've now got this onto a portal, and the portal is very effective in the sense that our clients can pick any country that they're interested in doing digital advertising for. If they work with us on advertising, then that's great. But if they don't, they can get these intelligence reports. They can pick a country, and we can pretty much look at everything from color palettes to call to actions to what are some of the top phrases in the country. And this particular data updates in real time. The other thing we are also doing now is data interrogation. So AI is predicting what kind of questions you're going to ask, and you can type your own questions in. And as I said, this is the world's first. So we're the only provider in the world that is now allowing our AI robots to talk to your creative, your designers, and your content team. So here's a great example where someone is asking our AI the questions, and in real time, in about less than 60 seconds, it's responding to those questions on how they can potentially build their ads. Another feature that we're bringing to market, and this is more a predictive analysis of how is your performance doing. And so here you can upload an image of your advertisement, and our AI will literally analyze this data, and within a minute to two, will spit out a response in scorecarding the performance of your ad based on that report. So here's the Philippines report, and it's given the score 54 out of 100, telling the person that they could do a lot more. And this is where the opportunities lie. So, what better way than give you an example? So, I work with a group called Study Melbourne as well, and my colleague who's on the webinar today, Mr. Phil Tan, leads this particular account, and he's had one of his biggest campaigns with Study Melbourne, where Study Melbourne was looking to attract international students to Melbourne. They were ranked as one of the top student cities in the world, so they used that brag tag in their marketing analysis. We used Quant Plus Insights. We took 3 days to film this particular video. I also happened to be in this video as an extra because the professor that was supposed to be on set had food poisoning, and they needed me to be a stand-in because he couldn't make that day of the shoot. But I will first play the video, and then I will explain to you the results from this particular campaign.
What makes Melbourne my choice for study?
I chose Melbourne because I wanted a world-class education in a world-class city.
I wanted somewhere I can feel safe and confident and can find help and advice when I need it.
Somewhere multicultural where international students are welcome.
I chose Melbourne because it's consistently ranked as Australia's best student city.
It's home to globally recognized institutions, including Australia's top-ranked university.
So I know I'm learning from the best.
Melbourne is also one of the world's most livable cities. It's easy to explore amazing places, and there's always so much to do with my friends.
Like discovering food from all over the world.
I wanted to study somewhere I can grow as a person. And I can work while I study and develop my career skills.
I chose Melbourne, Australia's best student city. Make Melbourne your choice for study.
So this campaign was very successful for us. It was one of our proudest campaigns last year. We been running it for 3 years, and we've had over 1 billion impressions for this particular campaign. We've had millions of visits to the website, and we've had recorded over 200,000 call to actions in our campaign. And so we have worked across probably 1,000 different creative assets using Quant Plus Insights, then using our media agency to publish this across 200 different channels around the world, and really had a very sophisticated approach in how we do marketing. But the difference here is prior to planning the creative shoots and prior to planning our media deployment, we had the creative insights of what the audience was looking for, what the top performing ads were, and what were the cultural nuances factored that everyone needed to factor in that particular digital advertising. Another place we're getting into is robotic enhancements. So here's a great example. In that video, you saw a student by the name of Alexis, who's studying an MBA in or a Master's of Business in Monash University, which is a group of 8 university. And in the university stage in Australia, there's 7 stages to get to enrollment and commencement. And in this particular case, her user journey, she was given 2 offer letters in error that was sent to her in error, and she was in Kenya at this time. And what she found out was that when she hit the acceptance stage, she did really well and that she was able to communicate with the team in a very sophisticated way. But the challenges were in the lead inquiry, application, and offer stage. And in most cases, across most of our clients, there's an 85% drop-off rate between lead generation all the way down to enrollment. So imagine if we could improve that user journey that a student goes through. You wouldn't have to generate that many leads and you'd be a lot more efficient in your marketing budgets. So here's an example of technology we're bringing to market. We already have a few universities that are piloting this particular example, but this is a great example where Alexis is speaking to a robot. Now, for those universities that don't have staff on the weekends, public holidays, or can't afford to have call center staff, this is a great solution in the future that's going to change how we look at enrollment. Now, in this particular case, the robot was able to study information off a website, but the sophisticated robots of tomorrow will have a control setting, and you will feed the robot the information. And if the information is not enough, the robot will learn when to triage those calls to a human being or back to your support center. But here's an example of a live call between a student, a human, and a robot.
All right, my first question is, how many faculties are there in the university?
Monash University has 10 faculties. These include 1 art design and architecture, 2 arts, 3 business and economics, 4 education.
I'd love to know about the business faculty, please.
Certainly, the Monash Business School is one of the 10 faculties at Monash University. It offers a wide range of programs, including undergraduate, postgraduate, and research degrees. The faculty is known
I'd like to know about the postgraduate programs, especially the Masters of Business program. That's one that I'm very interested in.
Certainly, the Monash Business School offers them.
So in that video example, we got her to interrupt the robot. And when I showed this video a few months ago, the technology didn't know how to do accents. Today, that robot can now do different accents, can do different linguistics, can do translations. There's a lot more enhancements that are coming down the pipeline, and they're also connected to your CRM. We've also got a new technology that's called planted voicemail technology, where you can plant a voicemail, and then when the student responds to that voicemail, it can come back into your phone systems. Here's an example.
Hello, Ankur. This is Robbie from the admissions office at Australian Catholic University. I'm reaching out because we recently received your inquiry form, and I wanted to personally extend a warm welcome to you.
And we're also seeing a huge impact on behavioral science on conversion. And so we have a system now where you can create various platforms with hundreds of nudging systems, which then creates artificial deep learning based on online user behavior. So we brought this technology from e-commerce, and we're now bringing it into the education landscape. And you can see here a little nudging system on the shopping cart, which then prompts the consumer to take action. Another example here is someone was on this page for a long time. A little nudge showed up and said most people really rated this product really highly. You've probably seen this if you own an Nespresso, where they use a nudging system to tell you which capsule is the most newest and frequent product to date. All of these things change how you make online behavior decisions. In this particular case, they did a test between shoe sizes. If anyone buys a lot of shoes, you know that sometimes you have to return the shoes. So here AI is predicting that you may return the shoe, and on the right-hand side, it says, unsure about your size, don't waste your time on unnecessary returns. So by giving you the ability to measure things ahead of time, it reduces your return rate. And so all of these e-commerce ideas are now coming to the education sector. And where we're going to be applying nudging system is to promote fewer clicks on websites, changing defaults on key features from opt-in to opt-out, prompts to reflect on the benefits of achieving study goals, reducing student anxieties about their academic abilities, support with study planning, weekly encouragement. But more importantly, this nudging system is now being introduced to the enrollment process as well. We're also doing something in dark social. So here's an example. We messaged Curtin University on the weekend. As you can see here, they responded. The robot response said, "Hi, Josh, we're not around right now. Our office is currently closed. Please get back to us in a few days." What we can do is now use our AI robots to take your entire website and create a booklet experience where you can chat with the robots on the weekend and you don't need human personnel. So that robot will be able to then speak to the consumers while your staff are away and triage that or take whatever inquiries and direct that particular consumer to wherever they want to go. Here's a great example with Australian Catholic University. We sent them the same message and they didn't respond for 2 weeks. So imagine if you're doing advertising and people are hitting your platforms and you don't even have the ability to respond to these particular students. With AI, we can change that and have real-time personalized experiences using robots. Another thing that we're also bringing to market is we also do a lot of traditional media. So we have partnered with groups that have large data sets, everything from visa transactions of where students are spending money. We have information on where students are migrating, what countries they're coming from, where they are in the country, are they onshore or offshore? And we're then able to target billboards and traditional advertising and out-of-home advertising, as well as digital advertising based on postal code and geographical zoning. So based on where students are hanging out and spending the most amount of time or money, we can use these data level sets to then create sophisticated targeted marketing campaigns. So these are just a few of the things that we're bringing to market. Because we have a very large presence in Australia and we also have a very strong education presence because we've been doing this for 16 years. If anyone has any questions or wants to pick my brain, you can find me on Bosco as Bosco Anthony on LinkedIn, or you can use the QR code that will take you directly to my calendar scheduler, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for your institution. And Patrik, that's just me, and over to the group for questions, I guess.
Thank you, Bosco. I think this was a very interesting journey. I remember when we first started to talk about AI innovations and everything, just to see the plethora of options and, the level of sophistication, how it ties back, to developing an international student recruitment strategy, and then placing all those advertisements. I think it's just fascinating. You once told me, I think when we met in Australia a few months ago, that you think that AI will not replace humans, but AI will replace humans who do not work with AI. I just wonder if you still believe this is going to be the case.
Look, I'm the first person to say that I am what we call the generation of the superhuman, where I'm leveraging AI using actual intelligence to leverage artificial intelligence. So I would be the person that demystifies AI, and I would challenge the notion that, AI is here to replace us. I think it's up to humans to decide what that future would look like. And I think the humans we need to be worried about are the ones that are adopting AI and using it for evil. I think the ones that are using it for good are the ones that need to do more of it and also help empower other humans to get more comfortable. If we look at history, if you think about the Smith Corona, it was replaced by the keyboard. If you think about the time when we used to buy DVDs at Blockbuster, now we watch movies streaming them on Netflix. If you think about the time when we had the Motorola phone, or if you think about the time when we had those little pages, now we can text each other. So as a human race, we're evolving, and the interdependency of robotics and intelligence through robotics is our next step for evolution.
Sure. And I wonder, given your vast experience in the field, where do you see institutions going wrong with implementing AI in either marketing or recruitment?
I think that's the challenge is the biggest challenge that we have is to get the right people in the room. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and in some parts of the world, the institutions in education, their systems are very archaic. So, a lot of institutions may have 35 tech stacks in their enrollment process that don't speak to each other. Or if I'm speaking to different departments, you have a marketing department, you have a recruitment department, and then you have an IT department. Well, whose budget do you require to use to adopt innovation? And do you have the right people in the same room? Most of the time, my biggest challenge as a supplier is to speak to the right person at the right time.
Sure. Referring now to the obvious volatile, situation, it's very, very dynamic in terms of student flows, evolution. We've seen the impact of the visa policy change, improvements in local education systems. So students do have multiple options at their disposals. It's really not comparable to 5, 10 years ago. I wonder, considering the foreseeable future, how agile should institutions be, in your opinion, when they sort of deploy marketing campaigns?
Look, we have to be dynamic. In some cases, we have to also be able to react very quickly because of the visa scenarios. I think one of the synergies that BONARD has with GRG is the information you're providing is the first thing we apply in our media planning. Give you a great example. Um, Last year, we had a couple of institutions call us and say, "Hey, can you turn off our advertising in this country because at the moment it's not doing well from a visa perspective. We have student rejections, we have delays, and we really don't want to fill the pipeline with this particular country." So in those scenarios, you have to be agile, you have to be reactive, both on an institution level and also, in that particular reaction because of what was happening through policies and visa delays. In some cases, a country may be going through political turmoil and the quality of the lead isn't the strongest because there's people that are just trying to get out of the country and look at scholarships as a way to do that. So the quality of the lead isn't the strongest. And sometimes we have to look at geographical targeting. So we have to rely on the recruitment managers to give us that information to then better optimize those campaigns. So there's different tactics that we apply that are either proactive or reactive. But in most cases, as an institution, we have to embrace the ability to be agile as well.
Thank you. I think I can complement in our experience, we see more and more institutions taking a more active role in terms of being able to identify their markets, but also to be very, very dynamic in terms of decision making. When obviously planning things like recruitment travel, digital marketing campaigns, partnership building, we're seeing more and more knowledge being sort of shared across the board as well. And I do think that this is going to be one of the traits of how the education system is going to prove, resilient. Obviously we have still elections coming up in several destinations, and while we don't expect the wind to, start flowing from a different direction, that there's going to be some stabilization. And obviously, in terms of rebuilding brands, it's going to be quite essential to convey the right message to international students, parents, agents, the whole supply chain. I'm also monitoring the Q&A section. I don't see any questions coming up, but I'd like to encourage anyone who wishes to speak to us privately about our experience in the field with developing these campaign strategies and solutions to providers. Do pick our brains. We'd be very happy to consult. You can also use us as a sounding board. Probably at this point, I would really like to thank you, Bosco, from taking the time. I know it's quite late in Australia, but I really enjoyed the practical examples that you were able to share. I hope it was inspiring to our audience, and we obviously look forward to continuing to provide market intelligence and relevant case studies to clients, partners, and stakeholders. So thanks very much, everyone, for attending today's webinar.
Thank you for having me, Patrik, and lovely to see you again.